host and a good neighbor, and there was not part of our agenda a trilateral meeting, so there is no problem. Please. Saad Silawi from Arabiya Network. Did you discuss with the President the Iranian influence that is expanding in Iraq and the almost complete Iranian control over Baghdad, as the press sources seems to indicate?
In Iraq, did you broke this big wall between Iraq and Iranian? So, and are you going to deal with?
I didn't understand your first
to
question.
deal with the Iranian directly?
Am I going to meet with the Iranians directly? Is that the question?
The question of Iraq, yes.
As far as the first question that was mentioned by the report, I think these are wrong and exaggerated information, and they are being used as one of the propaganda mechanisms to give the impression of sectarian strife, so that we reach a point of no return. Because we want to emphasize that we will not allow anybody to exert their control over any part of Iraq. If there is any talk about intervention in Iraq, and all the discussion, all the talks about people or other nations exerting control over Iraq, this is not true. This is a political process in Iraq. We want good relationships with our neighbors. We want complementary relationships with our neighbors to protect the region from tensions. But the main principle underlying all these is the respect of the Iraqi borders and the internal affairs of Iraq.
Iranians fear democracy. And that's why they destabilize Lebanon. That's why they are worried about the establishment of a Palestinian state. I appreciate the Prime Minister's views that the Iraqis are plenty capable of running their own business and they don't need foreign interference from neighbors that will be destabilizing the country. I am very worried, as should the world, about Iran's desires to have a nuclear weapon, and therefore will continue to work with the world to send a clear message to the Iranians, the Iranian government, that we will, they'll become more isolated. And my message to the Iranian people is we have no beef with the Iranian people. We respect their heritage, we respect their history, we respect their traditions. I just have a problem with a government that is isolating its people, denying its people benefits that could be had from engagement with the world. And I told the Prime Minister we'll continue to work with the world community to insist that Iran abandon its nuclear weapons programs. And I have said that if they were to verifiably suspend their enrichment program, we would be a part of the EU3 plus Russia plus China discussions. They know how to get us to the table. The choice is theirs to make. It's the choice of the Iranian government as to whether or not they make the right decisions for not only the sake of diplomacy, but for the sake, more importantly, for the sake of their people. We might as well keep going, Prime Minister. Richard.
Thank you,
Hold
Mr.
on
President.
a second, please, sir, please. Thank you.
When we were in Baghdad 6 months ago, you expressed the same kind of confidence in the Prime Minister and his government that you've expressed today. Yet there have been repeated rounds of disappointments when it comes to the Prime Minister's Baghdad security plan, with his plans for reconciliation. I'm wondering, if anything, if you've had any doubts over the last 6 months about the strength of his government, about the Prime Minister's own abilities, and what gives you such confidence today to think that he can achieve what he hasn't done over the last 6 months?
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, he's been in power for 6 months, and I've been able to watch a leader emerge. The first thing that gives me confidence is that he wants responsibility. The sign of leadership is for somebody to say, I want to be able to have the tools necessary to protect my people. One of his frustrations with me is that he believes we've been slow about giving him the tools necessary to protect the Iraqi people. And today we had a meeting that will accelerate the capacity for the Prime Minister to do the hard work necessary to help stop this violence. No question, it's a violent society right now. He knows that better than anybody. He was explaining to me that occasionally the house in which he lives gets shelled by terrorists who are trying to frighten him. And so the second point I make to you is that I appreciate his courage. You can't lead unless you have courage. And he's got courage, and he's shown courage over the last 6 months. Thirdly, he has expressed a deep desire to unify his country. You hear all kinds of rumors about the politics inside of Iraq. I'm talking to the man face to face, and he says that he understands that a unified government, a pluralistic society, is important for success. And he's making hard decisions to achieve that. No question, it's been tough. It would have been a lot easier had people not tried to destabilize the young democracy. His job would have been more simple had there not been terrorists trying to create sectarian violence. Now, I want everybody to remember that it was Mr. Zarqawi of al-Qaeda who said, let us bomb Shia in order to create the conditions necessary for sectarian violence. The Samara bombing started off this new phase of violence. The Prime Minister comes in about halfway through that phase in order to, he'd been selected, and now he's dealing with, a serious situation on the ground. And what I appreciate is his attitude. As opposed to saying, America, you go solve the problem. We have a Prime Minister who's saying, stop holding me back. I want to solve the problem. And the meeting today was to accelerate his capacity to do so. It's not easy for a military to evolve from ground zero. And I appreciate our forces, and I appreciate General Casey, who've worked very hard to train the Iraqis so that they become a capable fighting force as well as a unifying element for Iraq. But it's one thing to put people in uniform and another thing to have clear command structure or the capacity to move troops from point A to point B or the capacity to make sure that the troop carrier from point A to point B has got the necessary air in its tires or oil in its engine. In other words, this is a sophisticated operation to get a unifying army stood up. And one of the reasons I appreciate the Prime Minister is that he, on the one hand, sees that it's a sophisticated operation to get a military up from zero, but on the other hand, is frustrated by the pace. And the reason why he's frustrated is because he wants to show the people who elected him that he is willing to take the hard tasks on necessary to provide security for the Iraqi people, such as hunting down those who are killing the innocent. And the reason I came today to be able to sit down with him is to hear the joint plans developed between the Iraqi government, the sovereign government of Iraq, and our government to make sure that we accelerate the transfer of capacity to the Prime Minister. And I know he's looking forward to more capacity being transferred so he can do his job. Anyway, he's the right guy for Iraq. And we're going to help him. And it's in our interest to help him for the sake of peace. You're a... Oh, huh?
To keep this new ceasefire agreement, and what should be done with the Palestinian Christians who disagree with them?
Well, first of all, there's no question that if we were able to settle the Palestinian-Israeli issue, it would help bring more peace to the Middle East. And therefore, our government is focused on helping developed a two-state solution. Matter of fact, our government strongly believes in the two-state solution, and I believe it's in the Palestinian people's interest that they have their own state, and I believe it's in Israel's interest that there be a democracy on our border, and therefore we're working to that end. Look, there are extremists who want to stop the development of a Palestinian state, just like there are extremists who want to destabilize Lebanon, and we're strongly in support of the Sonora government. Just like there are extremists who want to destabilize this young democracy. Isn't it interesting that the radicals and extremists fear democracy so much that they're willing to kill innocent people? And the task at hand is to support moderate, reasonable people in their quest for free societies. And that means that Abu Mazen, who I believe wants there to be a Palestinian state living side by side with peace in Israel, deserves the support of the world. And he deserves support in peeling his government away from those who do not recognize Israel's right to exist. And therefore, Condoleezza Rice will be going to talk to Abu Mazen tomorrow, as well as Prime Minister Omar, working with both parties together to see how we can advance the vision that the Prime Minister himself talked about earlier this week. My advice is support reasonable people and reject extremists. Understand that most people want to live in peace and harmony and security. It's very important for the American people to understand that most Muslim mothers want their children to grow up in peace, and they're interested in peace. And it's in our interest to help liberty prevail in the Middle East, starting with Iraq. And that's why this business about graceful exit just simply has no realism to it at all. We're going to help this government. And I'm able to say that we have a government that wants our help and is becoming more capable about taking the lead in the fight to protect their own country. The only way that Iraq is going to be able to succeed is when the Iraqis, led by a capable person, says we're tired of it. We don't want violence. We want the peace that our 12 million people voted for. And it's in the world's interest that Iraq succeed. Mr. Prime Minister, you want to answer some more questions? You want one? Go ahead. Hold on for a minute.
Sixth question now. This is the seventh, and this is the eighth. Eighth questions. Mr. President.
We're getting fired at all sides here, so to speak, you know. Which one, Mr. Prime Minister, would you mind calling on one of your press correspondents? Yeah, this guy? Okay. This guy?
In light of the war that the United States is fighting against terror in Iraq, what has been accomplished? What do you expect to be accomplished after a 3-year confrontation? Another question. Other people are accusing the United States of bringing terrorism to Iraq. And the proof is that what's going on in Iraq and what's going on in Afghanistan, the proof is that, and what's the biggest loser is the Iraqi citizen.
That's an interesting analysis. The biggest loser for a free society is the Iraqi citizen when this society was just liberated from the grips of a brutal tyrant that killed thousands and thousands of the Iraqi citizens. What has been accomplished is the liberation of a country from a tyrant who is now sitting in jail, getting a trial that he was unwilling to give thousands of people he murdered himself or had murdered. Secondly, this country has a constitution which is one of the most modern constitutions ever written in the Middle East. This is a government that has been elected by the people. No question, it's tough. But the reason why terrorists are trying to stop the advance of freedom in Iraq is the very reason why we need to help them. Because they can't stand democracies and they want to impose a hateful vision on as much of the world as possible. They want safe haven from which to launch attacks again. A safe haven in Iraq, a country that has got a lot of resources, would be very dangerous for America. It didn't take but 19 people who were trained in Afghanistan to get on airplanes and come and kill over 3,000 citizens in my country. Threats that gather overseas must be taken seriously. if we want to protect ourselves. And the best way to protect ourselves is to hunt down the terrorists and to help young democracy survive. Freedom and liberty is the great alternative to the hateful vision of those who are willing to murder innocent lives to achieve their objective. And so you bet it's worth it in Iraq and necessary. And I was very proud and pleased to see 12 million Iraqis go to the polls to be able to express their desires, their wishes, as they helped put a government in place now leads.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Good to see you.
So President Bush and Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki of Iraq, they're shaking hands after a press conference which amounted to a very strong vote of confidence by President Bush for this beleaguered Iraqi leader, the leader of a nation at war with itself, a civil war by any measure, really. President Bush calling him a strong leader who wants a free and democratic Iraq to succeed. And more informally, President Bush said he's the right guy for Iraq and we're going to help him. There were a couple of headlines out of this. First, President Bush said that this meeting essentially increased Prime Minister Maliki's power, his capabilities, his authorities, he kept saying it, to fight the war. One of the complaints the Prime Minister has had is he can't control his own army. It sounds like he will be able to give more orders on the battlefield. Both men came out strongly against any partition, any splitting up of Iraq, and they both said that Iraq would essentially be for Iraqis, that there should be no meddling by neighboring countries. Let's go right now to Terry McCarthy, ABC's Terry McCarthy, our lead reporter in Baghdad, who's in Amman right now. Terry, you know Prime Minister al-Maliki, and you know Iraq as well. We heard a lot about reconciliation, about taking on the criminals. I just wonder how much of what you heard from these two leaders, how much does it bear on the reality of Iraq as you see it and experience when you report in Baghdad?
Well, of course, the main thing that came out of this press conference from Maliki's perspective is a commitment by President Bush to accelerate the handing over of security responsibilities to the Iraqi forces, to the Prime Minister himself. And that, of course, is something that he has been saying for some time, that for as long as the United States is the primary lead in supplying security in Iraq, that actually makes the problems worse, not better. So he would like to see more security responsibility on the Iraqi side, which would, in his eyes at least, take the heat out of the insurgency, take the heat out of the problems his government is facing, Terry.
And we're joined also by Martha Raddatz on the phone, who you heard her ask a question of the President of the United States. Martha, I want to ask you, there's a lot of talk in Washington, around the country, that the President, after the November elections, will be forced to set some kind of horizon in the Iraq war. Tell the American people that he has a vision of the troops coming home. We didn't hear that from him in there at all.
We certainly didn't hear that, and he said very strongly he had no plans to bring the troops home. He was setting no kinds of goals for al-Maliki. He said the goal is for them to get these Iraqi security forces working and up and moving as soon as possible, and that's all he kept saying over and over, Terry. In fact, I didn't think there was very much new in what they announced at all. We already knew about the Iraqi security forces and both wanted to accelerate the Iraqi security forces and the training and the equipping, and what he was talking about there was logistics support. That's one of the things the Iraqi security forces have suffered from. They have not been able to go from one place to another without the help of U.S. troops. I was also surprised that he said that U.S. troops should be involved in sectarian violence, should be involved in separating these sides.
There's a lot of questions, Martha, as you know, about the capabilities of those Iraqi troops. A lot of people think they simply are not ready for the task, but it sounds as if Prime Minister al-Maliki is going to get charge of them and send them into the fight if they'll go. Let's go to Baghdad now. Hillary Brown is there for us right now. And Hillary, I want to ask you, as you listened and watched this press conference, you know, here in America there was so much anticipation for this meeting, as if something significant, a big change would come out of it. What's the feeling about this summit in Baghdad, and how do you sense the relationship between what we heard from these leaders and the reality on the streets there?
Well, here in Baghdad, there wasn't a great deal of expectation. I mean, there were no high hopes for the, for this summit. And of course, as we know, the Sadr bloc, which is a very powerful political bloc in Mali's own government, has suspended its participation because Maliki went. The Shias want a timetable for U.S. withdrawal, and they want it now. But on this question of the militias, which came up in the news conference, it's important, I think, for people to understand that it is very difficult for Maliki to crack down on the militias, notably the Mahdi army, because the Mahdi army is the military wing of the Sadr party, which is one of the most important parties in government and is a crucial part of his own political base. And how is he going to take on the Mahdi army? The estimates are that it numbers now about 40,000 men, maybe even as many as 60,000. Now that is about 5 times the number of combat-ready Iraqi troops now on the ground. So what's left? The police? Well, the police are notoriously infiltrated by the Shia militia. So it's a kind of mission impossible for him.
A private army there that he is expected to crack down on by President Bush. Let's go back to Terry McCarthy for a moment. You know, Terry, President Bush just said that Nouri al-Maliki is the right guy for Iraq and that the United States would help him. And one of the things the United States is now expecting is that there will be some grand political bargain, some way of bringing all the warring parties together into a unity government, a political solution here. Is al-Maliki the guy to do that?
That's, of course, the big question. And, of course, the leaked memo from Stephen Hadley yesterday raised that question anew. The American administration is saying in public that Maliki is their man, but in private, clearly they're having doubts. And, of course, Maliki is very nervous that he would be dropped by the Americans. That's why it was so important for him to get this endorsement by President Bush today. But behind the scenes, clearly they're having very tough discussions, and Maliki is not very happy. He's not happy that the Sadr bloc pulled out of his government. He's also unhappy that this memo was released and his position may be in jeopardy. Terry?
Right, something of a contrast between the public and private view of Maliki by the American government. Charlie Gibson, ABC News anchor of World News, is on the phone with us. He was in the room there. Charlie, I wonder what you make of the president's vote of confidence for the beleaguered Mr. Maliki.
Well, it's interesting to what extent it was an expression of confidence. They talked about adjustments. The president used that word, adjustments of U.S. strategy. He also talked about acceleration of hurrying responsibility or a greater transfer of responsibility to the Iraqi unity government. But there really, I thought, was sort of less than meets the eye out of this. You get some sense that not a whole lot was achieved in that meeting. It's difficult to tell. We weren't a fly on the wall in that meeting itself. But other than the president's talk about adjustments and about acceleration, I don't think there was an awful lot that came out of this. The president did say this talk of a graceful exit is just not real, and that was an endorsement. And I guess if you take anything out of this, it is that while we wait for commissions and while we wait for various study groups to report on their feelings of what ought to be changed, that the president doesn't envision much change, at least from what he said today.
Absolutely. The bottom line that we heard from President Bush today did not differ that much from what he's been saying for a long time. He said the United States will stay in Iraq until the job is done, as long as the Iraqi government wants us there. One headline, once again, may be that it seems as if the Iraqi government will now have more control over the battlefield. The accelerating of authorities, as the president called it, command over Iraqi troops in the war, the civil war in Iraq. We're going to return now to our regular programming. ABC News will continue to monitor developments in Iraq. And in the meantime, you can follow this story continuously on abcnews.com and ABC News Radio. We'll have a complete wrap-up later on Good Morning America. I'm Terry Moran. Good morning from Washington.
For continuing coverage of this story, stay with ABC News, abcnews.com, and ABC News Radio. This has been a special report from ABC News.